on Thursday, March 22nd, 2024. I will take the roll call. Pamela Brave is here. Patricia Trout, we know, is not here yet, hopefully joining us soon. Andrew Bowden.
Present.
Susan Landry.
Present.
And John Roshinsky.
Present.
All right. We do have a quorum. So I will continue. Pursuant to Government Code Section 11123.5, this meeting will be held by WebEx teleconference and at a primary meeting location posted on the LATC website. Anyone interested in participating in the meeting must join the WebEx meeting. Information and instructions to join the WebEx meeting are also listed on the meeting notice. And DCA will webcast this meeting for observation only. Committee members, please keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking. Members should keep their camera on during the meeting, and when you wish to speak, please use the raise hand feature or physically raise your hand on the video. When speaking, please identify yourself each time. For the agenda item, there will be an opportunity for public comment. And I want to advise the LATC on the voting requirements. Number one, all motions and seconds will be repeated for the record. And two, votes on all motions will be taken by roll call. I want to thank Ron Jones, board member of CAB, for attending today. Thank you, Ron. And
Thank you, Madam Chair.
oh yes, hi Ron, good to see you. And sadly, I have to announce that this is Andrew Bowden's last meeting as LATC member. Mr. Bowden's grace period will end in June. And I want to thank Annie personally for many years of service at LATC. You will certainly be missed as a committee member. And thank you so much. We will also be taking a lunch break between 11:30 and noon, and around that time, depending on where we are with our agenda items. I'm going to ask the members now if they would like to make any introductory comments. Yes, Susan.
Excuse me, I just want to thank Andrew also. You've been a valuable asset to the LATC. You have so much institutional knowledge about what has happened with us over all those years. You've been a major contributor to our conversations and actions. So I just really want to thank you for all your years of service.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate those kind words from everybody. And yeah, I think my journey here started in January of 2008 when I was appointed by Governor Schwarzenegger, and through two different appointments through Governor Brown and the current governor. It's been like 15 or 16 years of service to the state, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to serve with you and to serve the people of California. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And John, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, Andy, I just want to say that I've always looked up to you as a mentor in all of this service work, and consider you a very valuable friend as well.
Well, thank you very much, John. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I consider you a friend as well. And also Susan and Pam and Patricia and everybody at LATC. Thank you for all the years. It's been wonderful. I'm gonna miss seeing everybody and being a part of the action. But you haven't gotten rid of me. I'm still gonna be visiting from time to time at the meetings. So be looking for me in the audience.
Well, we're happy about that. That's a good thing. And yes, I mean, I just want to reiterate what everybody said. Since we first knew each other at ASLA, and I'm kind of following in your footsteps too, and do consider you a mentor as well, and a friend. So thank you again, Andy. We really appreciate all your service. You have made our profession, and you have protected the public for many years. So thank you. At this time, I want to ask if members of the public would like to address the committee for any items not on the agenda. Identifying oneself is voluntary, and at this time, we will open the meeting for public comment. I do want to remind that the committee may not discuss or take action on any item raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to refer the item to the next strategic planning session or place the matter on the future agenda. Under Government Code Section 11125 and 1125.7a. So at this time, we'll turn it over for public comment.
This is the moderator. I've opened up the WebEx Q&A feature. The instructions will be on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click on the question mark that's inside of the square, comment, and send it to all panelists. If you prefer, you can raise your hand by clicking the outline of a hand, which is on the bottom center command row. If you're calling in, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I do have a request. I'm going to send a request to unmute microphone from Stephanie Landrigan. And I apologize if I mispronounce names here.
Hello, I'm unmuted, I believe.
You are unmuted.
Thank you. Hello, this is Stephanie Landrigan. I am a licensed landscape architect, and I am the director of the Landscape Architecture Certificate Program at UCLA Extension. I would like to ask if the committee is going to discuss, and I see it is on the agenda, the sunset review process and the schedule of when that is. I have my students and I are very interested in this. So if it isn't, will it be on the next committee agenda?
I'm not supposed to respond to her.
Hello, Stephanie. This is Pamela Breathe, Chair of LATC. Yes, it is on our agenda. Item J is discussing possible action on the Structure and Operations Subcommittee, and then subsequently agenda item K is specifically reviewing and discussing possible action based on the sunset review hearing. And that is in the meeting packet that is also on our website.
This is the moderator. Next individual identified as Todd Trounero. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
My name is Todd Trounero. I'm a senior engineer and professional licensing coordinator for Caltrans. I'm here on behalf of the department. I just want to introduce myself to the committee and committee staff.
Thank you, Todd, for that introduction. And welcome.
This is the moderator. There are no additional requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving along to agenda item D, update on the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I'd like to ask Yvonne Durantes, DCA Board and Bureau Relations, to present this agenda item, please.
Hi there. Good morning. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for having me this morning. I'm Yvonne Durantes. I'm here with Board and Bureau Relations from the Department of Consumer Affairs. And I have a couple updates for you in terms of several different items in regard to both agency and the department. So please bear with me as I go through these updates, but if you do want me to repeat anything at any moment or answer any questions, I'm happy to do so. So starting off with Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency update. Last month, the BCSH agency officially welcomed the new secretary, Tamika Moss, and so DCA extends a warm welcome to Secretary Moss, and we look forward to working with her. Moving on to budget letter 23 to 27, current year expenditure reductions. Boards and bureaus are reminded of the Department of Finance's budget letter that directed all state agencies under the governor to take immediate action to reduce current year expenditures, with certain exceptions for time-sensitive, emergency-related, mission-critical, or information security needs. And DCA thanks boards for doing their part to reduce expenses and find cost savings as part of the collective state agency effort. If you do have any questions in regard to that, please reach out to us. Moving on to the DEI update, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee will hold its next meeting on April 5th. The committee will discuss DEI actions, priorities, and language access, and the committee will also elect a new chairperson. The DEI training opportunities continue to be a priority for the department, and as you may recall, DCA's Solid trainers underwent a DEI certification program with the University of Massachusetts in April of last year. Before the certification, Solid offered 3 DEI-related courses for employees. After obtaining certification, Solid has developed 11 new courses. In 2023, DCA achieved 2,079 DEI course completions. And I would like to remind the board of the training courses available on the board members resource page under the Learning Management System, including a recent training titled How Leaders Can Navigate DEI Dialogue in the Workplace. The training is provided by Christopher Veal, who has 25 years of coaching, training, and leadership development experience. It offers tools for effective communications, conversations, psychological safety, and how it impacts conversations, which includes discussion around challenges leaders are currently facing. This training is available online and can be completed at your own convenience. So if you do have any questions in regard to that or having any issues with logging into LMS, please let me know. Moving on to legislative hearing, interstate licensure compacts. Invited by the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development, DCA Director Kirkmeyer testified last month at an informational hearing focused on interstate licensure compacts. Director Kirkmeyer discussed the impact of licensing compacts on consumer protection licensees and board and bureaus, as well as the legislature. Director Kirkmeyer answered questions from the committee and provided examples demonstrating that compacts are not a one-size-fits-all solution. Rather, there are many factors for the legislature to consider, including the priorities of consumer protection and licensing standards that should not be compromised or lowered. 17 of the 36 boards and bureaus, which is 47%, under DCA offer some kind of form of reciprocity already, with several bills recently introduced proposing licensure compacts for DCA boards. DCA will continue to work with the legislature on this issue. Moving on to complaint prioritization in regard to Healing Arts boards, just for your information, in collaboration with DCA Executive Leadership Team, Executive Officer, and Bureau Chief Cabinet, DCA's DOI Office, Division of Investigation, updated the complaint prioritization and referral guidelines for Healing Arts boards, and so this was effective March 1st. Looking ahead, we do also just want to remind you to please complete your Form 700s, which are the Statement of Economic Interest within 30 days of appointment annually and within 30 days of leaving office. This year's annual filing period covers prior calendar year of January 1st through December 31st of 2023. And the official deadline for that is Tuesday, April 2nd. So coming up in just a couple weeks. And so if you do have any questions, please reach out to Melissa Gear, but please be sure to complete that before the deadline. You may be subject to fees if you do not complete that. And lastly, just want to also mention that we do have the board member orientation training coming up next week. So if you have been appointed or reappointed within the last year and have not completed this training, you do need to complete it within 1 year of appointment or reappointment. And so if you aren't sure or you're having any issues with reaching the learning management system, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you're not able to make the March 27th virtual training, there will be 2 additional virtual trainings. One will be June 18th and the other will be October 22nd. But that's all I have for you today. Happy to repeat anything or take any questions at this moment.
Pam, you're muted.
Why, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Yvonne. I just wanted to say it's a lot of information to cover, and I really appreciate it, especially the reminder that we need to complete Form 700. I see John has his hand up, so I will turn it over to you, John, for questions.
Thank you, John Rushinsky. I do have a couple questions in regards to your presentation, Yvonne. One in regards to the state government expense reduction. I did not see a copy of the letter, so I'm not sure exactly what the language was in there. But one question that I do have is in regards to the current budget situation in the state. Is the state looking at personnel reductions, elimination of positions, that type of thing? Are you aware of any of that might potentially affect the CAB or the LATC?
Not that I'm aware of right now. And so, we do have May Revise coming up, just a little over a month. So we will be receiving some more information once that comes around. There will be a little bit more clarity.
All right. And my other question is actually in regards to the presentation that you made at our last meeting in regards to the diversity, equity, and inclusion topic. And you had briefly mentioned there that DCA continues to support the boards and bureaus in expanding culturally competent communications and promote the importance of meeting the needs of California consumers, licensees, and applicants. And the question that I have is, are there DCA staff members who are available to assist in particular the recruitment of new members to these boards and bureaus, and also to assist the boards and bureaus in their communications, reaching out to those specific groups?
Yeah, definitely. So, as I mentioned, there are several of our solid team members that have undergone certification. So they are happy to assist with anything in regard to that. We also have our equity officer who does, I think she actually just finished up some hiring principles. So those might be great guidelines and can be used as tools and resources. But any specific questions that you may have, we are happy to walk through, as well as assistance with communication as well. Our Deputy Director of Communications does also sit on the DEI Steering Committee, and she is also always happy to assist with anything, and is always happy to provide her team's services as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Yvonne, on that topic, would that be something that one of those team members could come to our next meeting and provide a presentation of sorts?
Yeah,
Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I can definitely reach out to some individuals and see if we can make that happen.
Pamela, this is Laura. Can I just clarify, what specifically do we want them to present on? I'm not quite sure I understand what we're asking.
Well, I'm going to go back to what John said. He was referring to the aspect of recruitment and outreach. So I think just maybe making more known to us how they could assist us. If that's something that seems appropriate to the committee. If there's any, and if you have any information on that, or maybe Laura, it's simply a conversation that we have here. If you're aware of what they are providing as far as services, that's sort of what I'm getting. John, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah.
So just, I think, John, you asked about committee members, so you mean LATC members? We don't generally get too involved, I think, in the appointment of the members. That's controlled through the governor's office and the legislature. So are you talking about doing outreach to try to get people to apply to serve?
Yes, that's primarily what I was interested in. I've reached out to a couple different groups to let them know that there were openings on the LATC coming up. Encouraged them to consider applying, but did not receive any type of response as far as I'm aware. But I know that this is an important issue to the DCA as a whole, and I figured any way that we could at least understand what their outreach program is into these DEI communities would be important and a benefit, not just to the LATC, but all the boards and bureaus.
Okay, thank you. We'll figure it out.
Does anybody else have any questions? And John, I see your hand up, but I'm assuming that's just left over.
Yeah, that's all right.
No worries. No worries. Okay. And have we seen Patricia yet? No, it does not look like it. Laura, would it be possible, could someone reach out to her? I texted her, but I haven't seen anything back.
Sure, we will do that.
I will do that. This is Kimberly. I will do that.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Kim, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
If I can just say something really quick, when I saw Patricia earlier this week, she did mention that her husband was going in for surgery this week. So her delay might be something to do with that.
You're right, John. That is correct. I do remember her mentioning that now as well. So yeah, there might be, hopefully everything is okay. All right. At this point, I have a question. We move on to item E. We do not open anything up for public comment on agenda item D. Is that correct?
We actually open up for public comment on all items on the agenda, so we can go ahead and do that.
All right. That would be great then. Thank you.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you're logged in and would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, which is typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment in the text field and make sure it goes to all panelists before you click that send button. For those who are calling in, you can press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I have no request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature via WebEx?
Yes, please. Thank you, Elizabeth. we will move on to agenda item E, budget update from DCA Budget Office. And I'd like to ask Luke Fitzgerald, DCA Budget Analysis, to present the agenda item.
Good morning, and thank you. My name is Luke Fitzgerald, and I'm a budget analyst with the Department of Consumer Affairs Budget Office. I'd like to thank the committee and executive staff for allowing me a few minutes to present on agenda item E, the committee's expenditure projections and fund condition statement. First, I'm going to start with the committee expenditures, which is page 11 of your materials. These projections are based on actual data through fiscal month 7. This report includes 2022 through 2023 actual expenditures in green, as well as 23 through 24 budgeted and projected expenditures in blue and orange. Over this 2-year period, costs are going to be relatively similar. As we move to the end of the document, you will see the committee had a beginning base budget of approximately $1.31 million and is projected to spend a total of just under $999,000, creating a reversion to the committee's fund of approximately $311,000, or a reversion percentage of 23.83%. The next document I will be going over is the committee revenue projections, which is page 12 of your materials. This report includes receipts collected through January and projected revenue to year end, and I'll go further into these projections as we transition to the next slide. The next slide, which is page 13 of your materials, will have an updated handout. This is the committee's fund condition statement, and as a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom and left to right. The left column is the committee's prior year 2022 through 2023 actuals. It shows the committee began 22 through 23 with a beginning balance of $958,000 and collected $868,000 in revenues, with $114,000 from initial license fees, $719,000 from license renewals, and $35,000 was collected from the issuance of citations, fees, delinquent fees, and other revenue. The committee expended $1.173 million, which includes $87,000 in direct draws to the fund for statewide pro rata and pension payments. The committee ended 22 through 23 with $653 in reserve balance, or about 7 months in reserve. For the current year, the committee projects revenues of $1.188 million, with $155,000 projected from initial license fees and just over $1 million from renewal fees, and $29,000 from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenue. The committee's 23 through 24 expenditures are based on the governor's budget, with fiscal month 7 projections just under $1.1 million between authorized expenditures and direct draws to the fund, leaving the committee with a fund balance of $742,000, or about 6.5 months in reserve. The Budget Office will continue to monitor the committee's revenue and expenditures and report back to the committee with monthly expenditure projections as we continue to close fiscal months in the current fiscal year. And just a few things to note of the committee's fund condition. The fund condition is a static snapshot in time. One of the main driving factors expenditure increases in future years is a result of personal service adjustments. These include general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The Budget Office includes a conservative ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. You'll also notice revenue is projected static in the out years. The fund condition statement includes the projected increase in revenue for the initial and renewal licenses in current year and out years. And lastly, I'd like to note to the committee that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the committee's need for additional resources, which would create a cost pressure on the fund. The Budget Office will continue to monitor the committee's fund condition statement and keep the line of communication with the executive staff open for any future needs or expectations. And again, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present at today's meeting, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Luke. I have a couple questions to start, and then I'll go to the other committee members. On the page 11 matrix titled the expenditure sheet projection report. They're on in the green columns. The last year, it looks like. Am I correct that they, let's see, on the per diem overtime and lump sum budget of 3,000, the 24,257 was actually realized? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So those were the actuals that we ended with at the end of the 22-23 prior year. That included a lump sum payout to an employee that retired.
Yes, okay. Got it. And that's the main reason for that large delta?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. So then, not anticipating that this year, we should be closer to our budgeted amount, I would assume. Okay, great. And just one question on the encumbrance category. Understanding what encumbrance means, but as it specifically relates to the operating expenses, what can you give me an example of what that is in that category? I understand it more from a property standpoint than actual like operating expense, I guess.
So the encumbrances are just contracts that were fully encumbered at the time of the encumbrance, and as POs are processed, it pulls from that encumbrance amount. So, for example, one of those encumbrances is the contract for business modernization, and so as those costs are used, then the funds are pulled from the encumbrance and then moved to the year to date.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. I will go to John Roshinsky next. Roshinsky, pardon me.
Yeah, John Roshinsky. I have a few questions here. Can you explain on the first spreadsheet we're looking at here? I understand past year budget. Can you explain what the FM13 signifies?
The FM13 signifies the closing of the year. So that is the final numbers, the actual, so to say, for prior year. So that is what the final expenditures were for the committee.
Should that have read FM23 versus FM13? So yeah, I'm a little confused on what the 13 signifies.
So there's 12 fiscal months in a year, and we do our projections starting with June as fiscal month 1, July as fiscal month 1, and June is your fiscal month 12. However, there's still potential invoices that end up getting paid in what we call that final FM13 month. And so that is when we actually fully close out the year. So that's what that references. So we can adjust that for future presentations for clarity.
Okay. My next question is in regards to our recent fee increase. And my understanding is that took effect on January 1, 2024, which I'm assuming is the current fiscal year or the fiscal year 24. So one of my questions is when we're looking at the fund analysis, was that taken into account when we're looking at current year here? Because half the year fees were collected at the smaller amount, and the second half of the year it's going to be at the higher amount. So when we're looking at the revenue generated for this current year, how is that handled looking at the out years? Because it's going to be a larger sum in the out years simply based on nobody's going to be paying $400 for renewal anymore. It's going to be 700.
Yes, you are correct, John. So January 1st, 2024 is when the fee increase went into effect. And so you'll notice for current year 23-24, we do have the fee increase included in those projections. So we did account for half of the year at the lower fee rate and then half of the year at the higher rate. And so you'll see in budget year 24-25 that the revenues are expected to come in higher, and that accounts for that fee increase being in effect for a full fiscal year rather than just half of the year.
Okay.
So that is accounted for in those out years. So these, so budget year and budget year plus 1 and 2 include projections with that fee increase.
All right. My next question is, in the notes on that page, note 2, expenditure growth projected at 3% beginning in business year plus 1. Does that 3% include anticipated personnel costs?
Yes, that is correct. That 3% is to account for any GSIs or entire retirement rate adjustments, employee compensation. That's all captured.
Okay, and that includes benefits as well?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I have, well, I don't know how many more questions I have, but my next question is, looking back at the first spreadsheet, the expenditure projection report, is there a particular line item in here that includes fees that are basically relegated to CAB itself from the LATC budget to cover expenditures that they are handling on behalf of us?
John,
I'm just trying to understand.
sorry, this is Laura. Sorry, I was just going to interject because I don't think you'll see it on here necessarily, although they will know better than I will. But LATC provides $26,000 annually to cover, and I think that was started before my time, but as I understand it, it was to cover a portion of the executive officer and assistant executive officer's salary for their time spent on LATC issues. But that's the only expense reimbursement the board receives from LATC.
Okay, and so
that $26,000 is actually captured in this projection under the departmental services category.
okay. As far, like you were saying, Laura, as far as you know, there's no other debits being taken out of the LATC budget at this time for that?
Right. We don't have, the board doesn't have the ability to take money from LATC or vice versa.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I think right now those are all of my questions on that.
Okay, thank you, John. Andy, do you still have questions?
Well, John actually asked a couple of the questions that I was going to ask, but since while the discussion was going, another kind of question kind of formed up in my mind, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this at this particular juncture, but you know, later on in the agenda, we're going to be having a discussion about a potential merged board, and that's going to have some impact, obviously, to the budget line items for both CAB and for the LATC. I would assume that things would get merged together with the budgets, but that brings into mind the license fees. So would the license fees then for the LATC or for licensees go down for landscape architects? The architects just raised their fees, their license fees, as I recall, to $400, and we just went from $400 to $700. So would we be able to revert back to $400?
This is legal, if I may, Chair.
Yes. please.
I think because the budget wouldn't necessarily include anything about the discussion about merging and the effect on fees on that, I think that question is better placed in that area of the agenda rather than on a review of the budget itself, the current budget.
Agreed. We'll table that until the appropriate agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andy, do you have any other questions?
I do, but I'm going to hold them for right now.
Okay. All right. Susan? Yeah, thank you. I see your hand is up, Susan.
Yeah, on page 11, item number 5324, facilities, the budget was 25, but the actual was 59. What? It's like double. What happened?
That's based off of the current rent schedule and additional surcharges with the Department of General Services. As we all know, there has been inflation, and so rent has gone up, and at this time the budget is still based off of that 25,000. So it's not just for LATC, it's kind of across the board with everyone where you're seeing that higher increase in facilities compared to the budget.
The rent doubled?
What was that?
The rent doubled with inflation?
I would have to go back to see what the previous year's rent was. But when the operating and expenses budget has not been revised for certain categories, so that is something that for future is something that the DCA office is aware of, and we'll be taking a look at as to when. I'm not sure, but it's not just the rent that's included within that facilities. There's other charges as well. But as far as how much the rent has increased year over year, I would have to look into that and get back to either Kim or Laura with that information.
Okay, it just seems like for the year isn't even over to already have doubled, and just making sure that that increase is projected out to the out years.
So the expenditures are based off of the board spending to their full appropriation in the out years. However, LATC always has reversions. But I will also note, if you look at prior year, the rent for facilities, the overall total was $59,837. So for this year compared to last year, it has not gone up significantly. So it would be more comparing year over year to see when kind of what percentage increase occurred each year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Harmony, on that line item, am I correct in reading that the budget was once again stayed at 25,000?
Yes, that is correct. The budget is static for facilities within the OE&E category.
Okay, understood. Yeah, it would be great if you could provide Laura and Kim with maybe a little bit more detailed on that, since Susan was asking about that, so we can see a little bit more of maybe, how the 25 was supposed to parse out to all of the representative categories under facility, and then where it busted, kind of.
Yeah, and I will also note that even though there's a specific budget to each of these line items, we look at the OE&E as a whole. And as long as the board is staying within their appropriation as a whole for operating and expenses, that's more of what we're looking at.
Understood. Great. Thank you for that. All right. John, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just have one other question or comment, I guess, would be that it appears to me that this is an expense that we have absolutely no control over. I mean, it's not like we can just go and rent our own office somewhere in that regard. So this is something that I hope the department and the state will be very forthcoming on what they're anticipating these expenses being going forward.
Thank you, John. Okay, seeing no other questions, we could open up for public comment at this point.
This is the moderator. I am opening up the Q&A. It is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, type the word comment in the text field, and send it to all panelists. If you're calling in via phone, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. At this point, we are on to item F, review and possible action on our last meeting, which was held on November 17th, 2023. I'd like to ask the members if there are any comments on the meeting minutes. Susan, your hand is up. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, this is more of a technical wordsmithing, I think. The draft meetings and the previous item under the finances did not have the item category listed in the agenda. Like this should say, some of them have, it tells you what the item category is before it starts it. Let's see, where is it? Like it'll say agenda item G.1, where the meeting minutes and the budget did not have that as a title on the agenda. Just kind of not, I'm not commenting on the actual minutes. I have no comments on the actual minutes other than the titles missing.
Is there a correction you would like to have made, Susan?
I don't know that it needs to be made, but just for the public to be able to track down the agenda. Every other item starts out by saying item number, blah, 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 and the title. This doesn't say item number, whatever the minutes were, H, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, are you okay if then it's just noted and for future that is is noted appropriately? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And John Roshinsky.
John Roshinsky here. I do not have any actual changes. I do have one question in regards to the item E. But I think that is in part related to our discussion coming up under item J. So I hold off on that until then.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. All right. Seeing no other comments from the committee, we can open this up to public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions will be on the screen here. For your review, if you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, send it to all panelists, or if you're calling in from a phone, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the November 17th, 2023 LATC meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
See Susan Landry as first and Andrew Bowden as a second. We will do roll call. Pamela Brief, aye. John Roshinsky.
Aye.
Andrew Bowden.
Aye.
And Susan Landry.
Aye.
All present, vote aye. The meeting minutes are approved. And I believe I may have gone out of order here as far as public comment. My apologies as I get used to my format here as new chair. At this time, are there any additional member comments? We will continue on to legislative update. by Laura Zuniga, which is agenda item G.
Thank you. Good morning. This can be fairly quick. We just have one item on the agenda, which is SB 1452 by Senator Ashby. She chairs the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. So this is the bill that will ideally extend the board and LATC's sunset date. So it has some language in it now, but it's fairly minor changes. It will be amended at a later date to include additional statutory changes and an extension of the board in the LATC in some form or another. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question, Laura. You said there's some minor changes. What are those?
It requires applicants for examination or licensure to have a valid email address on file with the board. If they have an address, they need to report it to us, so we could use that for some communications. That's the main change. That was one of the changes we recommended in our sunset report, but we did have other statutory changes. But they, just for purposes of introducing the bill, they just included a few changes at this point, and there'll be more substantive amendments later on.
Okay, so am I correct what we're seeing in our packet on, I think, page 22, where you're saying, where you have the summary, the paragraphs you've included there are the new items, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And then I will just keep the members updated as the bill moves through the process when there's substantive amendments.
All right. John, your hand is up.
Yeah, John Rushinsky. I guess it's more of a comment than a question. I'm assuming that there's a draft bill currently there, but we really have no idea of what is going to end up being in there once the committee staffs prepare their response to the sunset meetings. And so one question that I have is how much time is there going to be if we do know to respond to any of the proposed language that'll be in here? And secondly, my other, I guess, would be a question is the CAB staff still meeting with the committee staffs if they haven't already, and if they will be meeting in the future, how many meetings would be involved there? What would that process be like?
Okay, let me try to take the questions together. So I don't know if the legislative committee staff has draft language ready beyond anything that we might have submitted in our sunset report with some requested changes. When the bill does get amended, I don't know that we'll have any time to review the language before it goes in print. It's not necessarily something that we would get the opportunity to comment on before it's in print. We haven't had any meetings with the committee, or I and board staff, we haven't had any meetings with legislative committee staff since the beginning of the sunset process, when we just talked about generally how the process works. We do have, as will come up later on our agenda, some written responses, so we'll submit those, but we don't have any meetings planned at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any other questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll open this up for public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open for public comment. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside the square, type the word comment, and make sure it goes to all panelists before clicking the send button. If you're calling in, *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. Stephanie, I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. Stephanie Landrigan.
This is Stephanie Landrigan, a licensed landscape architect. I've been keeping track of this bill, SB 1452, was introduced in February. And I'm wondering, though, because any changes or substantive changes need to have a fiscal impact report and also for review. That is the question I'm going to pose, is who prepares the fiscal impact? Will CAB staff be involved in that and LATC staff be involved in that? Or is that done by BNP staff? And then how is that reviewed and I would say questioned or substituted?
This is Laura. There are a couple different ways that fiscal information is provided. The Department of Consumer Affairs Budget Office does an analysis for each bill that they're going to submit to the governor's office, and so the department typically asks for for program input on that fiscal impact, but the department provides the information. We just provide information to the budget office, for program detail. In addition, the legislature, through the appropriations committee process, will have a fiscal analysis where they'll look at the costs as well.
To further carry this conversation, thank you, Laura. So at present, what we have in front of us is pretty minor changes and maybe bringing it up to some of the current standards of requesting correct information. But if there are any other further changes that might occur within other areas of the Practice Act that would require, of course, that would be more of a regulatory change. And those regulatory changes, will they occur within the sunset review, or will they become outside and then become part of the sunset review, depending on the dialogue that occurs? Can you explain how that might work?
Sure. With the language that's currently in SB 1452, there's nothing that would require us to promulgate regulations. But if there are additional amendments made to SB 1452 and the committee needs to adopt regulations to implement those changes, that would go through a separate process, and there is a fiscal component to the regulatory process as well.
And there are also, I would say, public notifications and responses that are in that too. So that would follow the typical, I would say, regulatory change process. And so notifications would be out, timelines to respond, possible public meetings.
Yeah, if there are regulations, it is a public process. The committee would start the process at a public meeting as well as the board, and then there are requirements we need to meet for posting the notice and providing opportunity for public feedback.
All right, so this though is it's already a first introduced bill. As it becomes modified, which we all know it's going to, because once you have a bill, you're inviting comments and a public process there. So this bill then still will have to, any substantive changes to it would still go through almost an introduction again. Is that correct? Or would it continue on? I mean, I know there was also a legislator at one time who used to propose bills and then totally gut them, and that made people crazy. But this bill then, if it went through some substantive changes, would it be continue on the process it's on, or would it stop and start a new process?
It would continue on the process it's on. The bill is referred to the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. It will need to be heard there within the next month or so. And then it is listed as a fiscal bill. It will need to go to Senate Appropriations, the Senate floor, and then repeat that process on the Assembly side. If it's amended on the Assembly side, it needs to come back to the Senate for a final vote. So the bill continues on its process, and it can be amended at various points throughout that process. There are time frames for substantive amendments that are built into the legislative calendar, but in general, it could be amended at any point, and it doesn't start over, it just continues on the process.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that help.
This is the moderator, Tracy Morgan Hollingworth. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
speak on behalf of the California Council of ASLA. We've been watching, how these proceedings are going. We're a little concerned about any talk about merging, and just trying to make sure that, the LATC, because it was, considered one of the more progressive, use of time and use of department staff. I know that, it's always a fiscal concern, on all these different departments, especially with the state in such dire circumstances financially right now. But I would say don't rush to, try to do some kind of a different model of LATC. I think they're very efficient the way they are. Yeah. Sorry.
Hi, Tracy. I'm sorry to interrupt you. If we can move that down to the appropriate agenda item again, per legal's request earlier, I think that would be great. I'm sure we will be hearing a lot of comments during that point. It'd be nice.
What item is that, Pamela?
We will be listening to John Roshinsky and Andrew Bowden on item J, talking about their structures and operations subcommittee, and then subsequently, item K is specifically to review and discuss possible action on the sunset review hearing. So that is toward the end of the agenda.
Okay, so sorry. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Moderator, no additional requests have been submitted for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You have also promoted Patricia Thruff.
Great. Welcome, Patricia. I make a note at 11:04 that committee member Patricia Trout has joined the meeting, so that can be included on the meeting minutes, please.
Thank you.
We're now at item H, the executive officer's report, an update on board administration management, examination, licensing, and enforcement programs. And Kim McDaniel, I'm sorry, Kim, can you please speak on this? And Susan, do you have something that needs to be brought up prior? You're muted.
I was questioning at the top of the quarterly report of executive officer. It says that we met in teleconference in November. I thought we met in person in November.
Are you talking about the meeting minutes?
I'm under, I think we're still under point 1.
I see the item she's talking about. It's the first page of the report.
It says October through December 23 quarterly report, administrative, and then it says LATC met by teleconference in November. I thought we met in person.
It was teleconference. I had to ask. I couldn't remember.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was in person. Time's flying.
Time flies when you're having fun. Okay. We will go back to asking Kim McDaniel. Kim, can you please go over this item?
Okay, so this is our executive officer's report. So I'm actually going to turn this agenda item.
This is Laura. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm going to go ahead and defer to our executive officer to do her report.
I'll talk again. Sure. So we'll start at the beginning. We just have the summary of the last meetings, the board, and then I can add on here, the board's next meeting is going to be the first week of June, I think tentatively Thursday, June 6th in the Bay Area. The board does not have the ability to meet remotely anymore, so they are meeting in person. Let me see. We have the budget update. We just had a more comprehensive budget update, so I won't really go over this. Only to note, we should no longer be saying that the LATC fund is unsustainable. It is in good condition. Actually, we have a very healthy reversion, so we will make that change. And we note the renewal fee increase. On business modernization, we had our second release earlier this month, and it included automation of the certificate experience and the reciprocity applications. I just want to thank Nicholas from the staff for all of his work he's doing on this, because it is quite a bit. But it is going relatively well, and it's great to be providing additional services online. Going on to the next page, we have information on our social media accounts, and then we don't have any current regulatory proposals pending for LATC. There's information on the board's proposals. So moving on to page 4, we have at the top the legislative proposal on approval of plans that we've had for a while. This is included in our sunset report as a new issue that we recommended, so we'll see if this gets included in SB 1452. To note that committee staff did ask at one point if we had any examples to provide as justification. We didn't have a lot of new information, so just to remind members, if you have anything, please go ahead and send that we could provide as justification. So moving on to the licensing and examination statistics, you can see there's architect data, but then landscape architects start on the next page. We have the CSE performance for the last quarter of 2023, which is doing good. And then you can see the LARE statistics on the next page under Table E. And I think as we previously discussed, there was the special administration October 2023 for one division. It had a relatively low number of examinees, but the pass rate is low, and there are probably multiple reasons for that, but it is, we hope, an anomaly. So you can see also then underneath that, these statistics for the first administration in the new format. And then moving on, you can see the comparison between the California pass rate and the national pass rate. There's some wide variances depending on the division. And then moving on, we have enforcement data. You can see on page 9 of the report, the landscape architect information on the number of complaints received, how long they're taking, and then the most common violations underneath that, which is fairly consistent. And then we do not have any enforcement actions to report for this quarter for LATC. Are there any questions?
Susan?
No. Okay. Say that again about why the 21% pass rate on the October 23rd, the grading, drainage, and construction is only at 21%. What you were saying, it's because of the redo of the test?
So I'm going to give you my best answer from memory, and then I'm going to ask maybe Nicholas to speak to it, but because this came up at the board meeting as well, since they reviewed the same statistics. When they changed the format of the LRE and it changed how the divisions, I guess maybe corresponded together. This was one last administration, so candidates wouldn't lose credit if they had passed a portion of it. When they combined the divisions, it was going to change. So maybe Nicholas, I'm going to turn over to you if you can explain it a little bit better than I can from my memory.
Yeah. So after the new layer format was announced in 2022, we saw, and I'll touch on this later in going over the examination results, but we did see an increased number of people attempting sections 1 and 4 because those were tied together for purposes of transitional credit. And so my presumption is that the increased test taking numbers and the low pass rate for that October 23 administration of section 4 only is attributable to people attempting to pass that section to avoid losing their transitional credit for their already completed section 1. So.
Thank you. I knew you would say it better. Does that help, Susan?
Yeah,
Super.
I just didn't quite understand completely when you said it at first, so thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and likewise, you can see it hedging up again. If you look under the new layer blueprint, you can see it at 33%, which isn't great, but it's not 21.
Yeah, it's still relatively low. It is a small number of examinees, so I think we'll probably need a little bit more data, another administration, to get a sense of what it really looks like.
Yeah, and perhaps once the layer in this format is out there a little bit and people are clear on the content of each section, I would anticipate those numbers to go up. But this section, even its category prior, has never been a shining moment percentage-wise in our state for a while. So it would be nice to see that increasing. Andy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I probably comment on this, at every meeting, but when we start getting into double digits, difference between California pass rate and national pass rates, I mean, it's just, I just get so upset when I see this because it never seems to improve. And I've heard every reason in the book as to why there's such a large difference because of our differences in our paths to licensure versus other states and things like that. But, I'm sorry, when we look at even at the blueprint, the LAIR blueprint for December 23, 14% for inventory and analysis. And then again, difference, 14% difference between the pass rates and 16% difference in pass rates in grading and drainage and stormwater management. It's just, I just see this as something needs to be done. And I don't know that it's anything that LATC can do, but I'm hoping that the schools see this information and that they do what they can to make sure that their student candidates who are going to be taking the LAIR exam are better prepared to be able to take and pass the exam. This is it's just very discouraging, and I've been commenting on this probably every meeting we've had since I've been on the LATC. Since 2008 I've commented on this. So seeing as how this is my last meeting, this will be the last time you'll have to hear me say this, but anyway, I'm just hoping that in the future, we're going to start to see some of these numbers turn around. And it's nice to see that under planning and design, we're actually 1% higher than the national pass rate, which is great. I still think that a 64 pass rate, 64% pass rate is still not great. I'd like to see all these up in the 80% range, but anyway. Thank you very much for letting me speak my piece.
Absolutely. And I'll take on your charge when you leave, Andy. I agree with you. John, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, John Roshinsky. Andy, don't worry, the torch will be carried on. I have a couple items that I'd like to address in regards to right at the top, the legislative proposal, BPC section 5659. The division of the state architect does not accept any documentation stamped by a landscape architect. I can tell you that right off because I have heard that from a number of landscape architects and having currently working at San Diego Unified School District, I know is in regards to any school construction, landscape architects are in a supporting role there, and their documentation is not accepted without either an architect's or engineer's stamp. So that's someplace where we can start right there in regards to examples where that's an issue. I'd like to move on to CCR section 2615 form of examinations. It states down on about the 5th line there that an approved extension certificate in landscape architecture along with a 4-year degree. I think that's an issue that was overlooked at the time that we went through this legislative change. I think we need to definitely look in the future of amending that to take out the requirement of a 4-year degree in addition to the extension certificate. And at that point in time, we can go into all of the reasons for that. So I just want to put that on the record that that is definitely a continuing concern that I have in that area. The other thing I was going to say is in regards, and I thought I saw it in there somewhere where there was the comparison of the various landscape architecture in the program or in the state in regards to the pass rates. Or actually, this is in regards to the CSE.
Yeah, John, I think that may be the next agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll hold off on that one.
Okay, great, thank you.
Those are all my comments right now.
Okay, thank you, John. Susan?
John, will you go back again to what you were saying about, you're saying the state DSA does not take landscape plans anymore?
No, I'm not saying that they don't take the plans. They have to be overstamped by either an architect or an engineer. They will not accept a landscape architect stamp on those documents.
10 years ago.
Is it correct, John, that they will not accept the landscape architect as lead on the project?
My understanding is that if documentation is part of a package that goes to the state architect's office in that regard, that those documents have to be stamped either by an architect or an engineer as well, that they will not accept an LA stamp directly.
So that's a change from 10 years ago then? When I was doing schoolwork, I was able to sit down at the DSA. There was no building on the project, but I was the lead, and I got my stamp was, or my boss's stamp was on the drawing, and there was a ruling that did come out at the time that said for projects without buildings, an engineer or a landscape architect could be the lead. So again, that was 10 years ago. So are you saying that changed somewhere in there?
It's the legislative proposal.
Well, I'm not sure if it changed. I just know based on current information that I have that
It's so specific, I can't tell.
I know,
if it's part of a package for school construction, it has to be stamped by an architect or an engineer in order for DSA to accept that.
Does that mean if it has a building or without a building?
That could be, well, it's typically part of like a site
we could end this back and forth.
project where there's
this isn't really
building construction as well as
I'm
landscape
doing it to them, but yeah,
treatment.
if it's more or less the next
Because
update as
as
opposed to the update.
when I did
I'll
track
do it
and
on place
field
different
projects, they did let me sit, and I was my boss's
I
stamp.
apologize, this is legal if I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm looking at the agenda item, and it's the executive officer's report, an update. And so I apologize. I know I'm new to this committee, but this does seem to be going a little off topic, and especially with the back and forth. Again, I apologize. That's my role to make sure that when someone logs in and they see the topic, that it matches the discussion. So I will defer to you, Chair, to make sure that the discussion is matching the noticed agenda item. And if there is going to be back and forth, that it is specifically about the executive officer's report and update.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, thank you, legal. I would say to Chair Roshinsky and Chair Landry, if there are items, as Laura asked, where it shows that licensed landscape architecture stamps are not being approved, that you please get that information over to her, and then she can circle back to you with any questions she might have. I think that's probably the best way to handle this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Patricia, I saw your hand up. Is there anything that you want to add or a question that you have?
No, I was just going to confirm what John was saying.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, if you want to also maybe send something over to Laura, I think that would be great and super helpful, because that would give her additional information to include in any reports. Okay, thank you. We are, John?
Yeah, I would just like to add, I would like to see this agendized at our next meeting, this particular item. And then we can give it the discussion that it deserves at this point in time. And in the meantime, we can try to gather as much information on this as we can.
That sounds great, John. We'll push that to the next meeting and also just make sure that we have some good documentation so that we can discuss it
Andrew?
in a knowledgeable way, obviously. Thank you.
That looks
Thanks,
familiar. He's on
everybody.
the phone too, Jen.
Okay, at this
no,
time,
he's just
if
joining
there are
us.
no other questions,
He's just
I will
joining us.
open this up for public
I don't think
comment.
he's on the phone. Is he on the phone? Oh, he is on the phone. Oh.
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A
Can we
for
take
public
a brief recess
comments.
then?
If you would like to
Or you want him to-
participate, click on the question mark inside
Yeah.
the square, type
Just
the
take
word
public
comment
comment.
and send it
Okay.
to all
We're
panelists.
not
If you're
voting on
calling in,
anything.
press star 3 from
And
your
then we'll
phone to
take a
raise your
break.
virtual hand. And the instructions are on the screen for your reference. At this time, Stephanie Landrigan, I'm going to send a request to unmute your
Send him a
microphone.
message.
But he can't turn his camera off either. He just needs to
Again,
not be on the
I'm
phone.
Stephanie Landergan, a licensed landscape architect in California. And I would like to just make a comment on the pass rates as an educator. Part of the dilemma is you all are talking about the end product. You're talking about the exam,
All right, he just.
and you are making a leap saying that you feel it is the education, but the criteria for educators is actually set by the LAAB, and I believe that is where the discussion might have more, I would say, effectiveness, in that if what are the requirements for a university to be LAAB accredited, and it does not discuss anything about it being leading to a landscape architecture license, or that licensure and its passage rates are important. So that might be something that the state might want to look at,
They are, but it's also.
because oftentimes many states, as a former president of CLARB, many of the states follow the LAAB, that is the accepted accredited body for schools of landscape
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
architecture.
We made that mistake with the board too. Oh,
There needs to be probably a better association with the state regulatory boards, which typically is CLARB, but I would say there isn't a connection between LAAB and CLARB and state boards, and maybe even addressing the LAAB as the LATC. You could say we are finding a difficulty in this not being part of some of the criteria of being accredited. That would be a recommendation on my part. Thanks for allowing me to talk.
Thank you.
This is the moderator. There are no further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Okay, now we are at agenda item I, discussion and possible action on licensure examination pass rates of the LARE and the California Supplemental Exam. And now I will ask Kim McDaniel to please introduce this item.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. So I think before I introduce the item, I just want maybe do a time check. We're at 11:26, and I know when we opened the meeting, we had discussed taking a break between 11:30 and 12. And so I'm going to defer to our chair if that's something you want to do before we open this item.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. Let's, since this is somewhat tied to the previous, get through this, and then I think it would be great to start after our lunch break on J and K, since they're going to be a little bit more robust and they're kind of tied together.
Okay, give me a second.
If that is okay with everybody else on the committee, I guess I should be asking you as well.
Staff might need a break, honestly.
Staff, do you need a break? Do we need a break?
Nicholas thinks this item is pretty quick, so we can make it through this item.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, let's go for it. So this item here is agenda item I. It's a discussion and possible action on licensure exam pass rates for both of the exams for licensed landscape architects in California. And you see in the handouts under the agenda item, there's handouts that present some pass rates broken down by program, which the committee asked us to provide from the November meeting. And I'm going to ask Nick to share where he extracted these data elements from, and then to share a few talking points that he had prepared on this item as well. So Nick?
Yeah, so this is it's a 10-year survey for each of the two examinations that we use, the LAIR and the CSE, broken down by the institution in California, so the 5 lab accredited institutions, and then the one current extension program being UCLA Extension, and then the one previous one that I did also include being UC Berkeley Extension. And so you can see for each exam over the time period that that I looked at, you have the number of passes, number of fails, number of candidates who took the exam, and then some basic statistics being the average number of attempts it took a student from that institution to pass the exam, the total pass rate over the time period, and then the pass rate amongst first-time test takers. So hopefully this is helpful information. It does generally seem to follow trends that the committee has discussed in previous meetings, especially for the LAIR. But hopefully this is information that's helpful and germane to the previous discussion that we were just having on the last item as well. So I guess are there any preliminary questions, and then I can talk a little bit about specifically this in relation to the LAIR.
Okay. Do you mean in relationship to the CSE or the LAIR? You mean the LAIR, since we were sorry, Nick?
Yeah, because
So this first is the CSE. Do we have any questions specific to that, I guess? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. John?
Yes, John Roshinsky. A couple quick questions. I'm assuming that when we're looking at the number of candidates figure, that's the total number of candidates from those institutions that applied for the exam for the total of the 10-year period. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the number of unique candidates from each institution over the period that I looked at.
Okay. And in the case of UC Berkeley Extension, they don't exist anymore, do they?
No.
Okay, so it probably would have been good to have listed the date range. I'm assuming it would be 2014 until whenever they went out of existence on that one, just so that we know it's for a shorter period of time. My other question is, with the new business modernization, I know that one of the things that we were looking at in that is that we would be able to take all of this data and break it down more finely in regards, because I'm looking at, say, like, for instance, at Cal Poly Pomona, I'm assuming that 147 candidates include both candidates who went through the undergraduate and the graduate program. So it would be for each one of these that have either a graduate program only or both, it would be good to have that broken down so we can see what the differences are between those programs. And so that's basically the comments that I have, other than I was really surprised to see Because my understanding is the UC Berkeley program is strictly a graduate program now, and that it and the UCLA extension appear to have the highest pass rates, both initially and in total, over the course of this period of time. And I think in some respects that speaks very highly both of those programs. So it could be that I was going to say that might be partly due to the total number of candidates, but it seems like that doesn't appear to be the issue when you actually take a look at the numbers.
Thank you, John. Andy.
Thank you. I have maybe I'm just not reading this form correctly, but when I look at LAR sections attempts, we'll just take California in Pomona. Just for a second, let's look at section 1. It says passes 169, fails 174, number of candidates 227. Well, if you add 169 and 174 together, you get 343. So, and
I
that's
think
the way
we're
we
not. Yeah, Nicholas didn't give that part of the presentation yet, so maybe I'll let him jump in. If you don't have any questions on the CSE, we're going to cover that first.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right, no worries.
No, I don't believe I have any questions on the CSE. I was more focused
Okay.
on
the layer. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Nicholas for the rest of his presentation then on the layer portion.
Okay,
Yeah.
I apologize. I thought he was done with his presentation. Thank you.
No worries.
So I can address that question and say that the number of fails and the number of passes doesn't necessarily add up to the number of unique candidates, accounting for people who took and didn't pass the examination multiple times over that time period.
Great. Does that clear that up for you, Andy?
Yes and no.
Okay.
He's gonna want to know why.
All right. I'm going to send it back over to Nicholas. Let Nicholas go ahead and please finish up your presentation, and then we'll open it up to any questions again.
Sure. So you can see the same the same measurements listed for the layer by section. This time period covers the majority of the previous layer format, so there were only the same 4 sections over that period of time. And so, just a couple, as it relates to the ask that was made in the discussion about pass rates, I did want to also offer that we do expect that some of these pass rates may even out, given the recent regulatory updates that LATC undertook to allow for pre-approval for any section of the new format with a lab accredited degree or the extension certificate plus 4-year degree. And then CLARB, and their efforts to standardize the test moving forward with the new format and create uniform section length and move the content around in such a way that it's more consistent. And then just the previous points that we had also touched on regarding the announcement of the new layer format and the sort of altered rates based on people that were attempting exam sections that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that's most of the background information that I have on the layer section, and if there are any questions.
Andy? No? You're good? Okay, Susan? And Andy, your hand's still up. So
Yeah. So you break it down by school, but I don't see anything that breaks it down by profession. So like all these allied professions that we've allowed to, you get credit for a degree plus what years of experience. So do we have percent pass rates and fail rates for all these other non-landscape architect degree? Is there a way to put those in a category so we can see how they're affecting the pass, what they're doing with the pass rate?
There potentially could be a way to do that as well. So this comprises people that have landscape architecture degrees from these schools only, but there would potentially also be a way to look at people who have who qualified using alternate degrees like an architecture degree. Yes.
Yeah, or say a contractor. It just would be interesting to see how much compared to a university and a 4-year degree with the other pass to the test, kind of just to compare how the schools are doing compared to other professions.
We'll see if there's any additional data we can provide.
Thank you.
But this is like a rabbit hole we're going down. So.
On.
John Roshinsky. I want to kind of follow up on a couple of those questions. I'm just curious, do we have the data where we could look at individual candidates and how many failures that they had? Like, for instance, if someone, say, from Cal Poly Pomona sat for the exam and they had to take certain sections 3 times before they got through that, do we have any way of knowing that detail of individual candidates so that we can get an idea on like what's the average for all individuals from those particular institutions? Would be one question. And then another question, this kind of gets to what Andy was bringing up, is that when we look at the number of candidates, like for instance at these are for all, I'm assuming like the number up at next to the school name, like for Pomona, 291 candidates. That's the total number of candidates that were approved to sit for the exam. And then these are just the results for each of the 4 sections, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. That's the total number of candidates that were pre-approved and sat for the layer from the school, and then that differs from the number of candidates by each individual section because not everybody from the school took every single section of the exam, so the numbers are different.
Right. And so one other question that I have is, I know that with the next go-around of the exam, it'll be under the new format. Will we be able to convert this data to the new format where we know for those candidates that are continuing to take sections that either they did not take in the past or failed in the past and now have to take it under the new format, that there's any direct comparison that we can make in that regard?
As far as candidates who lost credit for previous sections, how they perform on the corresponding section of the new format?
Correct. Or just like, for instance, if someone passed section 2, that'll correspond to the new format, whatever that grouping is now that corresponds to section 2 or section 3 or sections 1 and 4, that type of thing.
We can take a look. It's probably a relatively small number, so we'll see.
The other,
it might be a weird, John, if I can interrupt on that one, it might be a weird comparison because it's not an apples to apples, section to section as well, but yeah, let's maybe talk about that a little bit more, because I think
Simply, they match up.
Right.
Clark didn't.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're getting.
Right.
I guess I should just suffice to say it's not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, that's
Right.
What
I do have,
each section.
And then what are we gonna do with that?
yeah, I do have one question that I do need to ask. It's kind of related to this, but it's not. And that is, I know that with the issues that were occurring with a particular number of candidates who were required to pass sections 1 and 4 in order to get credit for the new exam section, I became aware of this through my work on the CLARB work group that I'm on, that candidates who failed Section 4 on their retry at the last go-round were being offered to take the new CLARB test section for free in order to qualify for having passed sections 1 and 4. And apparently CLARB made this known to, well, I'm not sure how they made that known. And I'm just curious if they reached out to the LATC to make their candidates aware of this, or if they just contacted those candidates directly to make them aware that this was an offer that was being put out there, because I know the deadline for signing up for this is March 25th. And if they don't sign up for it by March 25th, then they won't qualify to retake the section for free.
They hadn't reached out to LATC directly to ask us to advise candidates, but they've had the free attempt at the current section 4, the corresponding current section 4, posted in their literature for quite some time.
John, do you have any other questions? No? All right. Patricia?
Yes, so going back to tracking the different schools, since we now have an experience-only pathway to licensure, it would be nice to track that as well.
Yeah, I think that's what Susan was reiterating. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be good to start including that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Andy, do you have another question? No? Okay, your hand is still up on your screen. Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other questions, I'll open this up for public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you'd like to participate, click on that question mark inside of the square. Type the word comment in the text field and make sure it goes to all panelists before you click the send button. Calling in, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, there are no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, we are now at 11:46, and I think we probably have a lot of hungry people. So I will let us have a lunch break. I know in the past we've done 30 minutes or 45 minutes. What would everybody like to do? What time works for you?
30 is fine with me.
Okay. Staff, how are you on that? Does that give you enough time?
Oh yeah, we're fine with 15 minutes. I don't know how short you want to go, but whatever you prefer.
Okay. Is 30 all right with everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Right over my suggestion.
All right. We will see everybody back here in 30 minutes. Thank you.
talking.
Okay, we have to stop.
$12:17. I'm going to go ahead and reconvene our meeting. And as I don't see Patricia, our vice chair, I will take roll. Oh, there's Patricia. She's there. Vice Chair, would you like to take roll for us as we start back this afternoon?
Certainly. Okay. Chair Pamela Brief,
Present.
Andrew Bowden,
Present.
Susan Landry,
Present.
and John Rosinski.
Present.
So moved.
And Patricia Trout this year as well. Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Patricia. We are on to item J. It is to discuss possible action on the Structure and Operations Subcommittee and address the following 2022-2024 strategic plan objective. And that is to research the economic and consumer protection impact of reestablishing the Landscape Architectural Board, or establishing a merged board with the California Architects Board to provide better representation, strengthen the distinction between the two entities, and increase efficiency. So at this time, I will ask Laura McDaniel to introduce this item, and then I believe we should have a report from potentially from John and Andy as well. But Laura, I'll start with you.
I think we'll have, Kim, do you want to present this item?
Sure, I'll just introduce it briefly.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it said Laura McDaniel on the paper.
Sorry,
I thought there was a new
we're trying to
person.
confuse you.
You are. You're making sure I'm on my toes, and I am not. Kim.
Got it. All right. So just briefly, at the November meeting, it was determined that a subcommittee was warranted to address with the chair as she read the description of the agenda item. The group is to review legislative history, administrative history, and to make recommendations. And so keeping in focus with the consumer protection focal point of the committee. And so John graciously agreed to lead these efforts alongside with Andy. And so I think at this juncture, I'll just turn it over to you, and we can go from there. So, John?
Sorry, I guess John Rosinski, I guess I'll take the lead on at least beginning the discussion. As Kim alluded to, it was decided at the November 17, 2023 meeting that we would form a subcommittee to take a closer look at the specific issues in regards to this strategic planning objective. It's important to reiterate that this was nothing new. This is something that had actually been under discussion for probably the last couple of years after the current strategic plan was formulated. I have since the November 17th meeting will admit that this effort has not gone anywhere near as quickly as I had anticipated. However, I can report at this point in time that we do have a committee set up, Andy and myself representing the LATC, and also have I had reached out to a number of individuals to query them on the idea behind this committee, and can report at this point in time that I have 3 commitments from Christine Anderson, Andy Bowden, and David Tatsumi who are former LATC members, have agreed to participate on the subcommittee and help us out. And there are a few others who have indicated that would make themselves available to answer specific questions or offer advice when it comes to specific questions and other items that the committee would be particularly addressing. Also, I think since the last November meeting, I have, as well as I'm sure all the committee members have given some thought about this whole item in regards to whether or not we do want to go forward with the idea of a merged board, or whether or not we want to maintain the status quo, at least at this point in time. Obviously, there's been a number of things that have happened in the interim, including that we've gone through our sunset committee meetings and have a little better idea, at least of what the sunset committee's members, what the pertinent questions are that they raised during the committee meeting, which gives us a little better idea of maybe particular items that we need to focus on when the committee meets. Now that we do have the committee members arranged, I'm looking at the arranging for the first meeting probably sometime around the first week of April. And I'll be working with LATC staff to help arrange what those dates may be. I'm anticipating probably 3 meetings, perhaps a 4th, to finalize a report that we would bring back to the LATC at its summer meeting, and then we would go from there. So at that point, I'd like to give Andy an opportunity to share any of his thoughts on this.
Well, thank you, John. Just to kind of go back in time a little bit, the original idea in the strategic planning session that we had a couple of years ago that I had brought up was to take a look at reestablishing the California State Board of Landscape Architects. That was the original thought. It wasn't until we had a budget meeting that it was determined that that probably is not a very viable idea. In fact, it's not a viable idea from a financial standpoint. So it went from that to then a possible discussion of doing a merged board, which seems to have kind of gotten some legs and some further discussions going. So, but I think from my standpoint anyway, it's something that we need to have other stakeholders get involved and have them provide us with some of their input. I'd be very interested to find out what CCASLA's thoughts are on it, and to try and get an idea of if they support that idea or if they don't support that idea. For those on the call who may or may not be aware, the LATC is a committee that operates under the California Architects Board. So anything that the LATC does has to be taken up to the board level, and the board is the one who approves or disapproves any items that the LATC generates. By doing a merged board, the thought would be that that structure would go away, and we would actually we would have members on the board. I would assume that the name of this new board would be changed to whatever it would be, but there'd be representation of both architects and landscape architects on this new board, should that be the structure that is decided that we want to go with. then it'd also have the public members as well. So how that would take shape or what form is something that we would need to discuss. So there's a lot of little parts and pieces to this thing. It's not just, a simple, quick and dried, okay, yeah, let's merge. We got to figure out what shape it would take, how, what the board makeup would be. And so we just need some more input. We need some more information. Personally, I would like to have some information that maybe staff could assist us with in taking a look at what other boards across the country are merged boards and how do they operate and how successful is that works, how does that work for them? I think I had heard at one time that in Alaska, after a long, arduous process, landscape architects finally got one seat on the board, but it was only one seat. And it was brought up to me if that one board person, that one landscape architect representative to the board happened to miss the meeting, then there's no representation to the board. So that would then come to mind, all right, well, maybe one board seat isn't sufficient, but if one board seat's not sufficient, what would be sufficient? And currently, right now, we have 5 committee members. And we handle the operations of the LATC through these meetings quarterly. If we were to do a merged board, would there need to be a subcommittee of sorts that would assist in dealing with landscape architectural issues that might come up? Because right now, the CAB meetings are, for the most part, almost an entire day, and the LATC meetings are usually about half a day. So would that mean a merged board meeting would be a day-and-a-half meeting? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of overlap between the two, between CAB and LATC as far as items that get presented. So obviously, there'd be some savings there, but still, we'd have to deal with the architects' issues that they have to deal with, and then we'd have to deal with the landscape architects' issues as they come up. So it's something that's, it's not an easy solution. So it needs to be further discussed. So I'll leave it at that. I'll stop talking and let John take it from here if he has more that he'd like to say.
Yeah, I was going to say that I totally agree with you, Andy. I think it behooves us to look at other jurisdictions that have merged boards. And I have, through my CLARB interactions, have spoken with representatives, including Alaska, Arizona, and several others who have merged boards and have asked specific questions to them about how they handle not just their meetings, but just the way that their staffs are organized in addressing the different interests and issues that they have to deal with on a daily basis, given that they're representing not just one profession, but several. And so I think as part of our discussion, I agree it's not just a question of what the board makeup is going to be, but it's like, what's the staff makeup going to be in regards to addressing the interests of both professions, and whether or not we have the subject matter experts as part of the board, like it's essentially set up now between the CAB staff and the LATC staff to address the particular issues that might be unique to our particular professions. So with that, I'd like to just open it up to the other committee members to get whatever thoughts and input that you have at this point in time. Again, I apologize. I know back in November when we and discussed doing this. I didn't anticipate that it was going to be this long to really get the thing up and running. But I think there may have been some advantages to holding off until after the sunset meetings in that regard.
Can I just, so, John, some of the things that you brought up around like staffing. So, we have a vacancy, we have several vacancies, and we've explored, various ways that a merged process could look. And so the Architects Board currently has managers that provide the leadership and coordinate meetings for their subcommittees. And so what that could probably look like is maybe myself, I'm being presumptuous, but another manager or myself would then serve in that same capacity so that landscape architects would have a subcommittee under the board, that would be staffed by a manager. So structurally and operationally, I think, we are at a point of opportunity right now with the vacancies that we've held on to, both in CAB and within LATC. And if there's any way that I can assist in helping better explain or answer any questions for you, we have tremendous expertise for the landscape architect profession, and we'll continue to do so, continue to have subject matter experts and staff who will be able to handle everything from enforcement to licensing and inquiries from the public, outreach, and everything else that we do here. So just wanted to assure you that we will maintain expertise and have the operational capacity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. I have a couple of questions before we turn it over to the other committee members for John and Andy. So thank you for giving us the dates of first week of April. If you could just, once you get that meeting scheduled, let us know specifically when it'll be and just keep us kind of apprised of these more specific dates. I like that that you're pushing to have that report completed as soon as possible, and I think that is very important because, as Andy mentioned, this has legs now. We were questioned about it in the sunset hearing, and so we need to do our due diligence at keeping this moving along. The issue is not going away, and obviously, as you suggested, the returning of the LAB from a fiscal standpoint, as Andy mentioned, is off the table at this time unless some new information is brought to us other than what we've received to date. So, we're moving forward looking at this merge board opportunity. And so here's my question. In addition, sorry, I heard some background. In addition to you saying you're looking at how staff might be organized at some of the other committees or other boards that are combined, are you looking also or asking staff to provide you with what the fiscal savings would be? And like Kim was saying, they can help with ways of like how things might be structured. And I was thinking that maybe alongside that, along with those structure options, we could then take a look at what does that mean from a fiscal standpoint, and and then do the sort of litmus test on it as, is one representing the health, safety, and welfare of the public better than another, making sure that there's equity on the board so that the public is represented, all of those sorts of things. But I think that I in my brain am seeing this fiscal component and that actual data tied in with this report somehow. Is that correct, John and Andy?
Well, I think as Andy stated, this is a very complicated issue, and I think we need to get into the discussion to identify specific ideas, and then before we can figure out what personnel changes may be part of that, and what potential
Do I just let it go?
cost
Yeah, what
savings
personnel-
or
personnel and like administrative functions.
budget
not their job.
implications would be associated with that. I know that in the past, the LAT staff has
I just let them talk.
done at least a preliminary survey of other
They can talk about it, but they don't
jurisdictions,
have a
looking at what other jurisdictions do have joint boards and that type of thing, but that's one area that we would have to go back and look at the specific information that they collected in order to determine what types of questions we would need to go back out to those other boards to specifically ask them essentially the same question when they formed a joint board, what were the fiscal issues that they were looking at and what were they able to establish in that regard. I can tell you that I think part of the idea of these more merged boards that were formed were as a result to kind of like the anti-regulatory environment in some of these states. So just like when the Board of Landscape Architects here in California went away, and as a compromise, we basically reorganized under the CAB. I think with some of these merged boards in other states, it was a similar situation where they were sort of forced into merging versus just going away altogether. But I can tell you in speaking with a number of these other boards that they all have their own issues in regards to how they operate and
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
I would like to ask if there's a way for just when we're reconvening in the summer, there just needs to be a sizable amount of information so that we are at a point where we can, I believe, start making some decisions on this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, on that statement. But in that, I think it's kind of an all hands on deck. So if there's anything I can do to help move this forward, I'm happy to do that. So just know that I'm available.
Pamela, this is Laura. Do you mind if I add something? I just want to say,
Please.
I know there are a lot of issues that the work group wants to discuss, and certainly they should, take everything into consideration as they talk about their objective. But some of these functions are going to be outside of the committee's jurisdiction, such as like how staffing works out and how budget works out. Those are some administrative functions that are dealt with, at the staff level versus at the committee member level. So I know that there are impacts the members might have questions about, but some of it will be outside the decision-making authority.
Okay. So Laura, on that note, is looking at the savings that could be realized with a merged board irrelevant, or is that not something that we should be taking into consideration?
I'll leave that up to you.
I mean, not
don't know that it's-
irrelevant, but not up to us, so we can't really guess at it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. I think it's gonna be hard to put a dollar amount on what the potential savings are, from a merged board. So, the committee can discuss it further. I can certainly just tell you from a administrative function, like the two programs are structured separately now with separate staff, with the separate funds, and if it was to be a merged board, some of those duties could be shared. Not that anyone would lose their job. Everyone is safe and valuable here. But we do have some vacant positions, that we're holding in LATC that was holding for budget reasons, and now to see what happens with this, there are a few vacant positions at the board, it is possible that some functions could be combined, and so that you wouldn't quite need the duplicate staff that we have now in terms of the number of staff we have, not the personnel themselves.
Okay. Would it be possible for you to put a list of some of those functions together, just so we're aware of how you think that could be?
I can, just to give you like a higher level, right? Both programs do the same thing, right? We license and we renew those licenses, and then we conduct enforcement. And so we have, like LATC had a full-time enforcement analyst, but looking at the number of cases that LATC gets, it doesn't necessarily support a full-time enforcement analyst. So it could be that those functions are shared with an architect's board analyst. They have multiple analysts in their unit to handle the number of cases the board has. So kind of similar for licensing. Are there any functions that could be combined and done by, one person? That's a little bit different as the workload is, higher in licensing for LATC than it is in enforcement. But those are things that we look at to see if we could combine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I am going to open it up to the committee. And Susan, and then Andy.
Thank you. How many members are on the CAB board?
The board has 10 members, 5 licensees and 5 public members.
So would our group add to the 10 or would become part of the 10?
That would be up to the legislature to determine the composition.
So it's not up to CAB, it's up to whatever we propose to the legislative.
We can make suggestions, either the board or LATC, but it will be up to the legislature to make that final determination if they're going to make a change.
Okay, and how much, I forget now, the architects are still charging the $400 for the registration?
Yes.
So even though we're up to 700, they have not gone up any higher?
Right, the current fee is $400. They raised the fees last year.
So something in the consideration of merging these would be not only what cost savings there may be from the board, but would the fee go down to be more commensurate to what the architect board is if we merged as a board? Or are they looking at the fact that we're bringing in more money that they would add that to their budget?
So if it becomes a multidisciplinary board, there are a couple different options. Right now, there is a separate fund for landscape architects and a separate fund for architects. So with one board, you can continue the 2 funds, and each costs are then just charged to that fund. Or the option is to create one combined fund. And so then the monies would merge, more than they do now, but those are all kind of questions that would need to be worked out if a proposal were to go forward.
Okay, those are some of the kinds of things that I'm currently thinking about is what our fees are, what their fees are, how many people on the board, how many would we have, and if we only have one representative, that to me that seems like really low, and I think it was John or Andy said that if that person can't make it, then we're not represented. I would hope it would be 2, but then I guess it goes to the legislation to figure that out. Also, high level, what is beyond a fiscal standpoint, really truly be able to articulate what the benefit of a merged board would be. So if I'm out talking to other landscape architects, I can really clearly articulate what this means. As we are standing alone as a committee versus what we would get as a benefit from the board for combining.
Yeah, and I think, Susan, one thing I'll tag on to what you were saying as far as the number, I think where we can look at this as far as any suggestion we might come up with is that it really comes down to a quorum issue, and that we would want to be in such a position that let's say there was one like Andy spoke of, or even 2 landscape architectural members that were not present, if that still allowed the board to have a quorum, that we could look at that as potential inequity and maybe not representing the public on the landscape architectural side as full as possible. So I think it does tend to, like John said, there's these depths, so, you kind of peel the onion in these layers. So it's something, I think, instead of, because we start to talk about numbers in some ways, and it's sort of an emotional response in some ways, and I'm just trying to get my head around, like, what data can we, is there data that we can kind of look at that like supports this, so that it takes the emotional part out of this, and really gets to more of like what's representing the public, what's keeping them safe, and that quorum aspect is kind of what does that for me. So that's just my 2 cents on how we look at that, even though that number is not even, at the end of the day, someone's going to make that decision for us if we decide to recommend this. And Andy, I think you were up next.
Thank you, Pam. Well, I guess really what I had started to say, or what I had wanted to say, is we just got to be careful about, we don't want to put the cart before the horse. So we need to gather the information together that's out there available to us. We need to talk to the stakeholders and get their opinions. I'd like to hear what the board has, what their comments might be. But another question I've got, and I've actually been holding this for a while, is we keep talking about the sunset review meeting that happened last week, but have not really heard what transpired in that meeting. Is that?
That's our next agenda item.
Well, I'm wondering if we need to pull that into this discussion item a little bit, because if there were comments that were made at the sunset review meeting that might have some bearing as to what we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm. There was a question that was posed to CAB in regards to the even number of CAB members. And Ken, do you want to go into that, or Laura, do you want to go into that?
Sure, I can go into that.
Okay.
So the legislative committees issue a background paper for the board and for LATC for sunset review for the hearing we had earlier this month. And in it, they raised new issues for both programs. And so it's an issue in LATC's, but in the boards, it's essentially the same question, but it starts with, in the board's report, bear with me, I'm pulling it up. It says that CAB has an even number of members. Should the board add a LATC member to bring its total to 11 in order to better ensure representation of that profession and eliminate any potential actions from being delayed due to a tie vote? And then in the staff comments, they said the board should advise the legislative committee as to the potential benefits of a multidisciplinary composition and the impacts of additional membership to its work at the board level. And then LATC has a question about LATC and CAB should provide additional information related to program-wide considerations and whether efficiencies will be realized through formal regulation by one entity. LATC and CAB should inform the committees about existing overlap in operations today and how a multidisciplinary board structure maintaining licensure for landscape architects through the Act could improve effectiveness. So I would say it did start out as a question of whether the board should just have an additional member, but I think through the comments kind of expanded to looking at something a little bit broader than that.
Okay. So I'm still just trying to, did it sound like it was positive that, was it a positive response that, a combined board, merged board, multidisciplinary board, whatever name you want to fix to this, was something that was being supported by both CAB and LATC? Or by the Sunset Review Committee? Were they looking at it favorably?
They don't. So we have to provide written responses to the questions. We haven't done that yet. We have 30 days from the date of the hearing. I would say that the committee as a whole, the legislative committee didn't really give a lot of, I guess I would say, feedback on this in one way or the other during the hearing. Pamela, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. I didn't get a lot of sense from that one.
I agree.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they don't really provide that at the hearing. So we'll find out when they come out with whatever their recommendations are, or, you know, whatever ends up in legislation, but I don't really know which way they're leaning at this point. I do think overall they really are interested in efficiency, so, but I don't know what that will translate to.
They were happy to hear that there was a subcommittee looking into this and that we were in conversation. And, you know, I discussed that, that Sunny and I had a conversation on the plane leading up to the hearing to discuss this a little bit more too, and they said they were happy to hear about that. So I think it is like you said, Andy, I think it is a conversation that needs to be happening between LATC and CAB to continue looking at this topic.
Yeah, a comment that I think that Stephanie Landrigan had made at our last meeting. She had offered a suggestion that this committee that John is chairing, should there be a CAB member also on the committee?
Mm-hmm. I think that would be a good idea, personally. Mm-hmm.
John, do you have?
Is John still there?
Does that become an issue?
Yeah, I'm here.
It's two separate bodies. It's
I
got
would
two
have no
LATC
objection to
members,
that.
So they're not public.
I
They
was
add an
thinking,
architect's board.
because
Is that an
Ron
issue?
Jones is
In terms of making their
the
work
liaison
subject to public
between
meetings.
the board and us, he would probably be the
I don't have
most
the answer.
Yeah.
Top of my head.
appropriate person, but I guess that would be up to the CAB
For
to
some reason,
decide
the subcommittee
who
would
they
not
would
just be
want the
open to public.
representative to be.
Well, I believe Ron is on, you know.
Ron's on the call.
I'm really good. We could
Oh,
do it
so-
via WebEx.
Could
Just
we
thinking
ask
maybe this
Ron
and post
what
it.
his thoughts might be to being,
Because as the lawyer,
party
you're
to
gonna be
this
always
committee.
on the side of public,
Yeah.
but you might be able to filter some of the comments too.
Yeah.
Hi, Ron.
Good afternoon, through the chair. Thank you for the question. I don't think the CAB would certainly have no objection to participating in the conversation. And I want to first say, from my perspective, it's a very complex issue, a lot of variables, and I appreciate the level of brevity that you guys, or the level of engagement that you guys are taking in trying to resolve this issue. But again, I think that everybody, I think Andy mentioned it's about not putting the cart before the horse and being patient as we basically evaluate this exercise. So I would say absolutely, I would be more than willing to participate. But as John said, it's really up to the body, meaning the board as a whole, to make that determination in terms of who they assign to participate. But again, I will certainly make myself available.
And if I can add, I think probably initially it would be better, at least initially, not to have a CAB rep, so that we can have an open dialogue just among the LATC committee. And then once we have things fleshed out a little bit more, any particular proposals or anything like that, then at that point in time, we bring Ron in or whoever the other rep might be and lay those out. And then at that point in time, get their feedback on what their thought process is on this.
And Madam Chair, if I may, I would ask Laura whether or not, in reading through materials that were provided to me, it wasn't clear to me as to whether or not there were any dates, certain deadlines that we had to address other than their initial response to the committee's questions.
So the only hard deadline is that 30 days to submit our written responses, which I think gives us till April 10th. And it's, we can provide even if we were to recommend going forward with, the staff recommendation about a combined board, the level of detail is in the response, I think is an open question about how much would have to be in there. But just to keep in mind, if the legislature goes forward with this, it's going to happen in this legislative calendar year, right? So that would be in the next couple of months, this proposal would go forward. So There's not.
And I guess my only question, would that preempt then any recommendation that may come from this committee exercise?
I don't think the legislature will wait for a recommendation.
And I know, John, you mentioned that there may be 3 to 4 meetings by the committee. My fear is that the legislation will make a determination before we can complete the exercise. I'll yield the floor, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. So Laura, a question for you. Based on that information, what is our, is there not a way for us to say we have the subcommittee by June or thereabouts, there should be a recommendation at that time at that time the legislation could be worked on if there is one. It's feeling like we're being backed against a corner here, right?
We can suggest whatever we want. It's just not in LATC's control or the board's control. It is in the legislature's control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know why. I don't know why the legislature would rush to push this forward. Until after everything is known and done and discussed. What is their benefit to pushing it? Okay, you have to have a response in 30 days.
So I think as we previously discussed when this item first came up, the sunset year is the year the legislature looks at all these sorts of issues for any program going through sunset review. So this is the time they're going to make these changes. They wouldn't consider it, generally speaking, as a standalone bill next year. This is the time they're reviewing the program and whether it should continue, its operations, whether there are statutory changes that need to be made. So that's kind of the reason for the timing.
I'd like to go back to Pamela, what you were saying about kind of not making this decision on an emotional level. And so I'd like to suggest that, that this decision is data-driven and that as we look at the 22 other states that have blended boards, I'd like to know, how many, the breakdown of the board, basically. So I'm hoping that's part of the data collection. And I also want to point out that, I've been on this board since 2015, and, I just remember this coming up multiple times about how we want to align with CAB, and I think, it's good for us to kind of, recognize the different aspects of the committee and the board and how we are aligned and how we do agree. I know that, this is, it's a huge decision, and I just think we need to keep that in mind that, we have done a lot of things, the committee has over the years too, to be more like the CAB. So I think this is very good timing, and I'm personally support a blended board. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. I would also, from my standpoint, I think having Ron involved in the discussions sooner than later makes sense. I think if we are, if we are looking at how, or if it makes sense to collaborate together as a joint board, I think working together on this exercise would be a good way to get started with that. So I just like, John, you to take a look at that as a possibility. And I would like to say that, perhaps we could, and would it be, maybe this goes out to Laura and Kim, could it not be something that we say to the board, hey, since Ron's our liaison, he's been at most of our meetings lately and all of that, we would like him to serve on this committee. It would seem to me that since we formed the committee, we could ask for who from CAB we are working with. Is that the case, Laura and Kim?
You want to request that it be Ron working on this committee?
Would that be unusual?
No, that's fine.
For
Sure.
us to, yeah. Yeah, okay.
Because it's going to be too late.
Because, I mean, he's here more often than anyone. It's like sees the topics that we're addressing and all of that. So I think it just makes logical sense. Versus someone that maybe hasn't sat at any of our meetings or ever watched an LATC meeting before. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that one. Okay, great. Anything else we need to discuss on this at this time? And I'll say Laura and Kim too, please, if there's information you feel everybody needs to hear, please, now's the time.
Just the only thing I would mention, it sounds like the members are interested in a lot of data. Just consider the amount of time it'll take for staff to gather whatever data requests you have for the planning of the committee or the work group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say any requests need to. Is it fair to say that any requests for staff need to be over within the next week to make this realistic?
We can talk about it maybe afterwards. We can figure out.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'll reach out to Kim and Laura, probably on Monday or Tuesday, with a list of information, at least initially, that we're looking at gathering. And again, I think part of that has already been gathered. We just need to go in and take a look at what we already have, and then also get assistance with setting up the first meeting.
What was that?
Great. Sounds good. Thanks, John. Really appreciate it. Both you and Andy and what you're doing.
I guess I do have one question in regards to the meetings themselves, and that would be what staff involvement we could expect as part of that, because obviously we're going to want to record the meeting so that we can document that. So I'll work that out as well with them.
Great. I just have one more thing, sorry. Ron, from the CAB standpoint, has there been a lot of discussion on this topic at your meetings? I was just at the last meeting, and nothing came up. Or has there been any committee work on this on the CAB end?
Madam Chair, thank you for the floor. The simple answer is no. Is that our feeling is that we would wait for the recommendation of LATC first. All the options that we have seen, I think John mentioned earlier about maintaining the status quo to what effect that in the form of whatever else that might look like. The second is a merged board, and I think the third was the idea of, and I think you mentioned it's not off the table, the idea of LATC becoming its own standalone board. So I think that we're open to entertaining all those various options. I think part of it is making sure we understand what LATC think works best for them and your stakeholders. But we also want to make sure that it basically serves the public's interest as well.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you, Ron. Okay. We are done on the committee. And Laura or Kim, is there anything you want to add before I open it up to public comment? No. Having seen none, I will open it up to public comment.
Says the moderator, the Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside the square, typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment in the text field, and make sure you hit all panelists before you click send. After calling in, star 3 to raise your virtual hand. I do have a few requests coming in. First, Stephanie Landrigan, I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone.
Literally, by law, the legislature is required to go through and eliminate waste and duplication and whatever.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
If the legislature
Thank you.
determines that
Can
we're
you all hear me?
duplicative, this is the time and this is how
Yes,
it
thank
gets
you.
eliminated.
Stephanie
Yes, I
Landrigan,
don't wanna
licensed
ask out
landscape
for
architect
more
in
things,
California. This has been very interesting. It does appear you sort of blended this agenda item with the other item, but I do want to give you a little history here. When I was chair of the LATC, two sunsets ago, the Board of Geologists was decided to be moved into the Engineers Board, and there was no discussion at all, and they were absorbed.
Hi, you guys are wasting your time. Doesn't look good.
So what I would like to encourage you to do is to work closely with CAB right now. Maybe you want to find out if the California Board for Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists have any issues that they can share with you ahead of time for an already California merged board. But I do think that working closely with CAB on this is going to probably make for a much better sunset review, because sunset review is where you can be made more efficient if you have not already responded. I know I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but I do think that the LATC has been talking about this for a very long time, and I don't think it's beneficial to talk to yourselves. I think you should be talking with the board and the board staff, and because I think you all will then have a plan of action to respond to whatever the sunset review efficiency might be proposed. Also, any of the meetings that you do have I would hope are going to be advertised and open to the public. I know there are many of us who are licensed landscape architects and students who are going to become licensed. They're going to be very interested in what's happening. And I thank you all for this discussion, but I do think that it's the timeliness of this really should be considered in collaboration between the CAB and the LATC completely now, and having a plan of action sooner than later. And I think June, I'm telling you, I think June's too late. Those are my comments. I'm just a historian here today, so thank you for allowing me to make my comments.
Thank you, Stephanie.
This is the moderator. Next individual, Tracy Morgan Hollywood. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
I'm back. This is Tracy Morgan Hollingworth with CCASLA, California Council of ASLA. The CCASLA would be a little concerned if the LATC's voice is not heard due to the small numbers of LAs in a merged board. I know, Pamela, when you were preparing for the hearing, you reached out to the ASLA staff in DC to prepare for the hearing. I think perhaps we should tap them for a little bit of research to help to see what their state government affairs staff can provide some of those answers that your committee's trying to find. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Tracy.
This is the moderator. Alan, I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hello. So, hi, my name is Ellen Brittingham. I'm here representing the International Interior Design Association. We represent commercial interior designers in the state. As others have mentioned on the call, merging a board or potentially expanding CAB was brought up in the Sunset Review. Our commercial interior designers, we share interest in this broader conversation of modernizing oversight for design professionals in the state. We look forward to stakeholder engagement on this topic. We've had meetings with some committee members here and staff, and just wish to continue collaborating with the LATC on which solution is best for consumers that provides fiscal stability for the governance structure. So those are my comments. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you.
This is the moderator. There are no further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you. All right. We are on to our next K on our list of discussions, item review, and discuss the possible action on the sunset hearing review. And I'm not going to get tripped up this time. So it's either Laura Zanuga or Kim McDaniel. Not Laura McDaniel. So I'll let you two play rock, paper, scissors over who's going to speak.
Kim, do you want to take this item? We've covered a lot of it, I think, in our prior discussion. But.
Yes, I think we did.
Yeah, I believe we have covered a lot of it, but for the formality's sake, the item is the sunset review hearing. And one of the things that I think is really important that the committee is able to hear is that we have 30 days, CAB and LATC, to write our responses to the questions that were sent to us from the legislature that Laura shared at the beginning, at some point during the previous item. And so, and I think Ron Jones also questioned the timing of the committee. So I think it's really important to just reiterate that before, the committee, the subcommittee has an opportunity to meet, those responses to the legislature will have been drafted and moved on. I think that's really important to understand.
Thank you, Kim.
What are the questions? Do we have a list of those that we can?
Yeah, we do.
Go ahead.
Bear with me a second. I just closed it by mistake, so let me pull it back up. I think LHC has 5 questions, so it's not too much. The first one is, what is the status of LATC's licensing population in terms of numbers, growth trends, if any, and additional data sets that could be helpful in evaluating the regulated individuals in this industry? This relates to some information that we provide in our census report that we're not able to provide some historical data because of a transition in DCA software, maybe is the best way I can say it. So this is more of a technical question we'll need to respond to. The next one deals with an issue that we included in our report as a new issue, and it's should a licensee whose license is expired for 5 years be required to meet the same application requirements of a new applicant? The third issue is on the legislative proposal we previously discussed about acceptance of plans at the local level with the statutory fix that we submitted. And then there's some technical changes that we recommended in our sunset report for just to make the act work better. So they asked for language for that or any amendments we might have. And then the fifth issue is on the structure. So it's not a long list.
With the fifth one being specifically about the board makeup.
Right. So
and whether we are,
should the LATC continue
a part of that board?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Laura.
Oh no, that's it. That's the wording of the question itself is a little longer, but that's essentially what they're getting at. Yes.
Yeah. Is this something you could send out to everybody,
Yes.
Laura, so they get a copy of this?
I'll send it out right now.
Great. Okay, great.
And I think it's also important to just remember that CAB also had questions on their sunset report that have impact on LATC. So the suggestion of greater inclusion with CAB as the discussions occur is really salient and I think very wise because they have their own sunset review with questions. And so it would be a wonderful opportunity for alignment and for, greater collaboration.
John, did you have a question?
I have a question if I may.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Andy.
So, Kim, you're saying that CAB has their own sunset review questions that they have to answer as it pertains to LATC. Can you share those with us? I feel like we're operating in a vacuum here. We don't have all the information that we need in order to make decisions.
Yes, Laura, can you pull those up? She shared them for the last item.
Same. I just emailed you the LATC, so I'll send a subsequent email. But it is the question really is the one we discussed previously about. It started with whether an additional member should be added to the architects board, so we're not even in case there's a tie vote, and then it gets into whether there is the board should advise the legislative committees as the potential benefits of a multidisciplinary composition and the impacts of additional membership to its work at the board level.
Okay, so when it says there, it should, and I guess this is really the crux of the question. Should you add one board member? So, and I think that's kind of the hang up here is like, we want to have a discussion is one sufficient, representation on a merged board? To me, that's the whole key to this thing. And why this is something that, we've got kind of mixed reactions. If you were to ask LATC people or landscape architects in general, they're going to say, well, no, wait a minute. The architects would have 5 members, or whatever the makeup is going to be, and landscape architects would have 1. So how does that seem like it's parity? That's going to really come down to the question, I think. So that's what I think the committee wants to be able to discuss and get stakeholder opinions on. Because otherwise, if we only have 1 and the architects have 5, that's, a 5-to-1 vote no matter what. So.
Understood. I think, Andy, so let me just play devil's advocate here a little bit. If we're interviewing other landscape architects for their opinion, I'm not sure how this relates specifically to the public health, safety, and welfare issue that we're asked to uphold. It's looking at the landscape architectural benefit. However, if we can say that, and this is why I keep going back to this quorum issue, if we can look at it from more of a sort of like data-driven or more realistic, so that we try to push our emotions out of this to some extent, and look at this from a quorum of what, based on a quorum being 2/3 normally of the board size, what does that mean so that if 1 or 2 landscape architects aren't available for that meeting, that there's still landscape architectural voting power on this, so that we are, whoever the landscape architectural board member is looking at that charge that they've been assigned through consumer affairs or consumer protection. So I think there's a certain amount where I don't want to waste our time. I'll just be really straight up asking landscape architects what their opinions are, because that's not really going to hold any water when we make a recommendation to the legislature. So maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but that's just sort of I want to put that out there so that we're really focused on all of this. And I do think we need all of these. Everybody needs to have the specific sunset hearing questions in front of them. In order for us to have a discussion today, that information needed to be in front of us. So everybody else is kind of at a loss. I mean, I had them because I was at the hearing, but nobody else does. So I'm going to go to Ron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one of the things that I would encourage both LATC to do, and I suspect that CAB as a whole thinks this way, is I wouldn't be reluctant to basically suggest what you want. And so there are a lot of factors that go into determining the makeup. For example, structurally, CAB is made up of 5 professional members and 5 public members. That's required to us by statute. And so it could change to 4 public members, and if we add 2 members from LATC and just reduce 1 less position from the public. So there's a lot of variables, and what the equation will finally land on, it can be determined. I think part of it is, and I think one of the public speakers mentioned, is that I would just discourage this paralysis of analysis. I do think that there's some really critical information, data that I think Pamela mentioned, or maybe it was Patricia who mentioned it, that's critical to the decision-making exercise. I think you gather that information, and I think you put forward the makeup that works best for LATC, and then engage in that discourse with CAB to find the best possible solution.
Pamela, yes. I have some real concern about this because, number one, we have absolutely no idea what the legislature is going to propose. I mean, they could just add a 6th public member and call it good in regards to breaking the issue with an even voting structure. I think the fact that we only basically have 30 days to develop a response to these questions, a lot of it is going to depend on how we respond. And my recommendation at this point in time, because there's too many unanswered questions there, is to basically just tell the legislature at this point in time that we prefer the status quo, because I think depending on how our response goes to them, they could take that any number of ways. And at this point in time, I mean, short of just agreeing with the CAB to a new board structure, which I don't see happening in the next 30 days, I don't know how we even respond to this without basically shooting ourselves in the foot. So that's my concern.
Understood. Thank you, John. Anybody else? Susan?
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards what John just said about status quo. We are working on sunset review right now. Is this for every 2 years? I forget how often we do this.
It has been 5 years since our last sunset review. I don't know when our next one will be.
So it sounds like it's best to finish the sunset review and get that out of the way, and then continue to look into this further, advise us more time, because there is a lot of information that needs to be collected, sorted, analyzed, and decisions made. And based on what I'm hearing from what CAB is saying, it sounds like we would be shooting ourselves in the foot by continuing to say merging as the sunset is going on. So I would like to see the sunset be finished. I see, Laura, you just sent the background paper. I just saw your email. I didn't open it up, but I did see you sent that. So I'm kind of leaning towards what John just said about keep it status quo for right now, but continue the committee and doing the work that the subcommittee that John was talking about.
Thank you, Susan.
I guess I'd like to hear staff kind of weigh in on that.
I was just going to say the same thing. I'm like, Kim and Laura, is is, in your opinion, status quo an answer? I mean, obviously we can answer it any way we choose. If we answer it status quo, do you see legislation still coming forward that merges LATC under CAB? And Ron, same, I think I'll group you into that question as well.
This is Laura. I would say I don't know for sure what the legislative committee will recommend, but I think that if the LATC recommends a status quo, that the legislature is not going to necessarily follow that recommendation. They're not going to be bound by that recommendation. This is in their control at this point.
Mm-hmm. And they are obviously like in the way they were asking questions. I will say since I was at the hearing, they're asking questions in such a way that they are looking for efficiencies. And I will say I believe that LATC is one of the targets that they are, target is maybe the wrong word, but one of the entities that they are looking at for potential efficiency. And Laura and Kim, would you agree with that or disagree with that?
I mean, I think, yeah, they're certainly interested in efficiency this year, and this is definitely an opportunity for them. I think it's an issue, though, that I don't know if it came from just the legislature looking at efficiency or the fact that it is in the LATC strategic plan to look at, the structure. And so they're necessarily following up on that strategic plan item and wondering, where it's going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And again, this is Ron, Madam Chair. I think my only comment is that I think a lot of what informed even your strategic discussion, or the discussion in your strategic plan was informed by the solvency of your committee. I think that issue has been resolved. And so that issue, with that no longer being an issue, I think it gives you a lot more wiggle room to determine what your fate looks like. And so being a standing committee does not basically poses a financial burden to CAB, particularly with the new fee adjustment. So I think possibly the status quo would be something that would still be embraced. Having said that, the sunset question spoke specifically about the efficiency, even in maintaining the status quo. I still think we have to address where we, both LATC and CAB as a whole, could be more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think that there's a great opportunity for discussion on that across the board. Mm-hmm. Okay. John, do you have another question?
Yes, I do. Given the fact that we have to respond back to the committee within the next 30 days, as of right now, what's our response going to be to them as far as the LAT response goes? I'd like to hear staff spell out what they're drafting at this point in time.
I don't have a draft response in front of me. We put together notes for the hearing in case the question was raised, but we'll work with Pamela on providing the final written responses by the 30-day deadline.
Well, and I'm speaking specifically at item 5 about the joint board, what our response is going to be on that.
Right. I don't have a response yet at this point.
All right, thank you.
So how do we, as a committee, and especially as it's driving the board, there's no, okay, so I will just say there's no motion required for this item, but how should we address Laura and Kim, where we're heading in our response and how we how we move forward on this particular topic, since it seems that there may be within the committee differences of opinion on how this is addressed.
Up to Pamela. Maybe she's the chair.
This is John Roshinsky. My recommendation is we respond to question
Since they made substantive
5, that we recommend the status quo.
They don't write these answers
I don't
like
know
that.
how LATD can operate any more efficiently than it already is. So if that's the primary concern, how do we
So I called over
improve
for public comment.
efficiency?
And then
I
we
don't
just
think
go
that
back
question
and
can be answered in
public
regards to a
comment.
joint board
So there's reminded they need to take public comment.
unless
They should
there's
take
a
it again
lot
'cause they
more
kept commenting.
input that goes into that. And it would be interesting to understand what the information is that the sunset committees are looking at and analyzing in that regard.
So, Pamela, this is Laura. Just a note that we should reopen for public comment since the committee members had some substantive discussion after we last opened.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, I will open for public comment.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you would like to participate, click that question mark inside the square, type the word comment in the text field, and make sure it goes to all panelists before you click send. Comment, press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, thank you very much. All right. Are we, Laura?
Yes. Sorry.
So from a committee standpoint, this isn't something that we're voting on. So I have a question for you on, like, my feeling is that we have gotten nowhere on this topic. I mean, there's been no decision being made. John has suggested from his subcommittee standpoint where he feels he is at. So does he then work with you on drafting that response? Or how is this, how is this handled, since there appears to be some differences of opinion on this within the committee?
What I would suggest, I was just trying to look at our procedure manual, because I'm remembering how we do it for the board. It's really, I'm going to say, just to make it similar, it's similar with the board. It's the board president or the LATC chair that is going to work with staff to make the written response or the recommendation. And we do that when something comes up that is in between meetings. That's
right.
That's what that position is for.
Okay. And so since this is on an issue such as this that has such a great impact, there's no vote on this from the committee members?
Well, I would say a vote isn't required because there's not a final product for the committee to vote on, right? We're not, yeah. But
so we would draft the response and then the committee would vote on that?
But we don't have time for that, given the
right.
Yeah, given the
So how do we handle this so that everyone has a voice here? Is what I'm saying.
If I may, this is legal.
Yes. Thank you. Please.
You're welcome. So part of the procedures and role of the chair is to kind of work as the appointed chair to serve as that voice, working with the executive officer to make sure the legislature gets what it needs in a timely manner. So at this point, since we do not have a final product for the committee to vote on, then the procedure is that as we move forward and are able to respond in a timely manner, that'll be the role of the chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, we are going to move on to item K. Or no, we're not. We're on to L. do future committee meeting dates. We do not want to do K again. So we have tentative LATC and board meeting dates identified. June, were you saying, did I hear that the CAB meetings are actually going to be in person? Is that correct?
Yeah, so with the changes that were made to the Open Meeting Act last year, the board doesn't have the ability to meet like this virtually, but LATC does as an advisory body. So the board has to meet in a traditional in-person setting or a traditional teleconference where we notice each location for each member. It has to be open to the public and accessible, or an option that I'm not sure I fully understand, where a majority of or a quorum of the board is in one physical location, and then other members can attend remotely without noticing their location. But sorry, that was a very long answer to your question. Yes, they have to meet in person, but given the budget restrictions, we need to request an exemption in order to travel to attend the meetings in person. And so we've had to limit the number of staff attending. We have to look at the location to make it the most economic possible.
Okay.
And so
LATC needs to add a June meeting, and per John's suggestion of when his committee would be finding their information and being willing to report. Because of the nature of this information, Laura, would it be possible for us to meet in public or in person, or do we have to do it this way?
I don't know that we're required. I can follow up with you and check and see what our options are.
Okay, that would be great. What we've done in the past is everybody's kind of opened their calendar and looked at times that work for the dates. And I think if we're looking at something in the summer with vacations and stuff, I'd like to do that now. I think that worked efficiently when we did that before. And if Fridays worked for people, we could look at possible dates.
I'll go ahead and start. I am available every Friday in June except for the 14th.
Okay.
You don't, I mean, Courtney, what do we have to put on the agenda besides this item? Nothing?
I am the same. Or wait, let's see. Nope, sorry.
This is John.
Yeah, the 8th.
Considering that the CAB meeting is June 7th, we probably want to meet at least a week, if not 2 weeks prior to that meeting. I'm looking at May 24th. And based on what report goes to the LATC or other issues at that time, then that would give at least a little bit of time to include that in any CAB discussion at their June 7th meeting.
I'm available the 24th of May.
Isn't that right before Memorial Day?
I was going to say, I'm trying to.
I am as well.
I'm not.
And that's a good suggestion, John. Thank you.
Sorry, this is Laura. That's the Friday before Memorial Day. I'm not sure if that will have the most availability. So we can survey members if you'd like after the meeting, so we don't have to do it here and determine when another meeting is needed. Yeah.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you, Laura. But we'll look at something prior to the June 7th. That makes sense. I think what John suggested makes sense.
Okay, we'll look at a few options. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Laura, when is my official last day?
June 30th.
Oh, let's get
May 30th.
June 30th, assuming that there's no one appointed behind you.
Okay, I thought it was.
We can all tell you how much we love you again.
Yeah, really.
We'll have you'll be like a sports figure that keeps coming out of retirement.
Yeah, I'll be like the Eagles and retire and then unretire.
And then unretire. Okay.
retire again.
do we, Laura, do we need people to sign up for the board meetings? Who can attend?
Yeah, if someone is available to attend. I think it's either going to be June 6th or June 7th. I'm sorry, we haven't nailed it down yet. In San Francisco, in person, yeah. And I don't know that we'll have the option for like a remote participation when we're not at a DCA location, like a DCA facility. We don't have the WebEx feature available. Yeah.
I am not available on the if it's the 7th, so I better not put my name in the hat there.
I can send in the survey email. I can include that to see if anyone is available.
That'd be great. Thank you. You're getting us close to the end, Laura. Thank you.
It was a very productive day.
Yes. It was. Okay. Any closing comments?
I have.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Yes, I would just like to mention, and unfortunately it didn't go on the agenda for this meeting, but my work with the Experience Requirements Working Group with CLARB is ongoing, and I'd like to see that agendized at our next meeting, and I can give a report on that at that point in time. It'll be right about the same time that the working group submits their final recommendations to the CLARB board. So
that'd be great. Thank you, John.
Yeah, no particular issues of concern at this point in time on all of that.
Great. Look forward to hearing about it. Patricia, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. So I just wanted to officially recognize Pamela Brief, our chairperson, for all the time and energy she put into preparing us for the Sunset meetings. So thank you again. I know it was a big effort on your part, and well appreciated. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Patricia.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say the same thing, Pam. I do appreciate all the work that you did, and John, also, you've been doing a lot of work on the committees. Unfortunately, with my being mayor this year, I'm fairly limited on my time, so I do appreciate everybody else stepping up. This is my last year on council, so hopefully next year, through my last 2 years on LATC, I can be more active. But also, Andrew, one last thank you. If we don't see you before you end in June, I just want to say how much I appreciated you all over all these years. I guess I've been on now 6 years of overlap with you, and you are just so knowledgeable, and all your institutional knowledge and your participation has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also like to give Andy a shout out. You're kind of my mentor, Andy, and just really appreciate all of your time and energy that you've put into the committee over the years.
A lot of love to you, Andy. I want to thank staff for all they do, putting our reports together, doing all the work that we ask of them ahead of time and in advance for everything that we've asked of them today. I want to thank everyone and especially Laura and Kim, who have been helping me specifically as we were addressing the Sunset hearing information. Thank you for that. But just hats off. We're so lucky we have such a great staff, and it really is. It makes our job on the committee so much easier because of you guys. So thank you, Ron. Thanks again for being here today, taking time out of your busy schedule, and thank you, committee members too, for everything you're doing and giving your time. So I think we had a great discussion today. John, kudos for your committee. I know you're feeling the heat and getting pushed, so I appreciate your just your always calm demeanor and willingness to have conversations. So I think we had a great meeting today, and I look
This
forward
is
to
legal,
our
if I
work.
may. If we could have
Yes.
one more opportunity for public comment.
Oh, on the closing comments. Yes, absolutely. I will open it up now
Thank you.
to public comment. Thank you, legal, for that reminder.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions will be on the screen here shortly for your reference. If you would like to participate and you're logged in, press on the question mark inside the square typically located bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. And in the text field, type the word comment and make sure it goes to all panelists before you click the send button. You can call in *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. The instructions are now on this screen.
I'm really sad that our ice cream place is closed right now because we could use ice cream. Someone set like a fire in front of it.
At this time, there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the
2 weeks
Q&A
ago. I think
feature?
I just checked Google Maps.
Yes,
It still
please,
says it's
thank you.
closed. Yeah, the one that's right across.
It is.
Perfect ice cream there.
That being said, we are at agenda item N, which is our adjournment. So if I have a motion,
So move to adjourn?
We don't need a motion, but
Second.
thank you.
oh, we don't have
No.
to have a motion.
No,
Oh,
you can adjourn us.
That is all you.
I can adjourn. I get to adjourn us all because I'm sure you would all object. At 1:48, I call this meeting to adjournment.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Putting up
Thank
with
you
me
all.
my first gig here as chair.
You did
Well
great.
done, well done.
You did a great job, Pamela.
Oh, John, thanks so much. Thank you. Everybody have a great weekend.
You too.
Okay, bye.